discretion is advised.
Nature doesn't think, it reacts. These aren't just freak accidents. These are nature's reminders that we're not in charge out there. These are 7 true stories, real people with one thing in common. Something wild happened. He thought he was their friend, their protector, their voice. For 13 summers, Timothy Treadwell pitched his tent in one of the most dangerous wilderness areas on Earth, Katmai National Park. Not just near grizzlies, but among them. He gave them names and filmed their lives. He looked into the eyes of 1,000-pound carnivores and said he saw kindness. But on his last trip, those eyes saw something else. That fall, in 2003, Timothy returned with someone new. His girlfriend, Amy Huguenard. She wasn't like him. She was cautious, nervous. She didn't trust the bears the way that he did. But she trusted him. They set up a camp in a remote section of Katmai where the bears were larger and more aggressive. They hadn't eaten enough, and Treadwell overstayed his usual trip. Most rangers and even his friends told him to leave weeks earlier, and he didn't. He had arguments with park officials, cursed at planes flying overhead, and ignored warnings from locals who knew what the bears were capable of. But nature doesn't care about warnings, and on October 5th, it struck. There was no video of what happened that night, only audio, 6 minutes long. The recording starts with the sound of rustling and then sudden panic. Timothy screams, "Get away! Get away from me!" He's begging, yelling. The sound of tearing fabric and the bear doesn't stop. Then Amy's voice, screaming his name, crying. She tries to fight it off using a frying pan, her fists, her voice, but she's not enough. Timothy dies first, and the bear drags him into the brush. And then it comes back for Amy. The audio ends before she does. When park rangers arrive the next morning, what they find isn't a campsite. It's a scene out of a nightmare. The bear is still there, guarding their remains. It charges and they shoot it dead. Inside its stomach, human fingers, a piece of Timothy's wristwatch, clothing, hair. They also shoot a second bear lurking nearby. Both are massive and starving. For years, people debated whether Treadwell was a hero or a fool. Was he brave for trying to understand nature or arrogant for thinking it wouldn't kill him? Maybe both. But one thing is certain. Treadwell went looking for peace, but some tragedies come without warning. Even in the most magical places on Earth. Because the next story didn't happen deep in the wild, it happened at Disney World. They were just trying to watch a movie under the stars, a perfect summer night. Warm air, calm water, laughter echoing off palm trees. The Graves family had flown in from Nebraska, a vacation they'd saved for, a magical trip to Disney World. And on their second night, they stayed at one of the most upscale resorts on the property, the Grand Floridian. Lush lawns, white sand beaches, fairy lights in the trees. It didn't feel wild and it didn't feel dangerous, but it was. That night, around 9:15 p.m., Matt and Melissa Graves sat on the shore of the man-made Seven Seas Lagoon, watching an outdoor movie with their kids. Their 2-year-old son Lane was playing in the shallow edge of the water, just inches deep. He wasn't swimming, he was splashing, just a toddler doing what toddlers do. And then the water moved. A flash of scales, a snap of jaws, and Lane was gone. Melissa screamed. Matt jumped into the water without hesitation, punching the water, diving under, clawing at darkness. He found nothing, no bubbles, no blood, and just silence. An alligator later confirmed to be around 7 feet long had grabbed Lane by the head and dragged him into the lagoon. No warning, no time to react. It happened in under 5 seconds. Park staff rushed to the scene. Rescue teams were deployed immediately. Helicopters, boats, drivers, but there was no sign of Lane. For hours, the water stayed still. People wept. Some stared blankly into the black lagoon, hoping it wasn't real. The next day, a dive team found Lane's body fully intact, just 10 to 15 yards from where he was taken. The gator had drowned him and left him. Disney's PR machine spun into overdrive. Within 24 hours, warning signs were installed across all resort beaches. Beaches were fenced off, lagoons monitored, alligators captured and euthanized. But it was too late for Lane. He was 2 years old, too small to fight, too young to run. He was just playing in the sand beside his parents on Disney property, a place people associate with safety, with joy, with magic. And that's what made it worse. It wasn't deep in the Everglades, it wasn't a remote swamp. It was right outside their hotel, right next to Cinderella's castle. Disney settled with the Graves family quietly. No lawsuit, no public anger, just grief. Endless, hollow grief. And today, a lighthouse statue stands near the site where Lane was taken, a tribute and reminder. The wild doesn't always look wild. Sometimes it looks like paradise, until it opens its jaws. Lane was 2 years old and he never stood a chance. But what if the monster wasn't in the water? What if it lived down the hall? It didn't happen in a forest or a swamp or a national park. It happened in a luxury apartment building in the middle of San Francisco. Broad daylight. Diane Whipple had just returned home. She was a college lacrosse coach, fit and energetic. 33 years old with her whole life ahead of her. She lived with her partner, Sharon Smith, in a quiet building in Pacific Heights, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. She wasn't walking through bear country. She wasn't swimming in shark-infested waters. She was carrying groceries up to her front door, and that's when she heard the sound, heavy paws, claws scraping across the floor, panting, low and aggressive. 2 massive dogs coming down the hall. These weren't ordinary dogs, they were Presa Canarios, not common pets, more like walking weapons. Each one weighing 120 pounds, bred for fighting, guarding, and intimidation. They belonged to the neighbors, Marjorie Knoller and Robert Knoll. The dogs were being kept for a prison inmate, a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was trying to breed them for profit. Knoller and Knoll were acting as his caretakers, and they had no control. Diane tried to move past them. She had no weapon, no warning. Just a door, a bag of groceries, and seconds to react. Then, chaos. The male dog Bane lunged, tore into her neck, dragged her to the floor. She screamed and kicked and tried to crawl, but the hallway was a trap. No escape, no help. He ripped at her face, her throat, her chest. The female dog, Hera, joined in. Neighbors heard the noise, the guttural, horrifying sound of a human being being torn apart. One called 911, but it was too late. By the time emergency crews pried her from the dog's jaws, she was barely alive. They rushed her to the hospital, but the injuries were catastrophic. Her throat was gone, her scalp peeled back, one arm nearly severed. She died shortly after arrival. The aftermath wasn't just grief, it was rage. The dogs had a history, multiple complaints from other tenants. People were afraid to use the elevator. Knoll and Knoller had been warned and they didn't care. They saw the dogs as misunderstood, but these weren't misunderstood. They were violent, out of control, and they killed an innocent woman in her own home. For the first time in California history, a dog mauling led to second-degree murder charges. Marjorie Knoller was convicted, sentenced to 15 years to life. Robert Knoll served time too, though less. The dogs were euthanized, but their legacy still haunts the city. Today, people still argue about breed bans, about owner responsibility, about warning signs, but for Diane Whipple's partner Sharon, there is no debate, only silence, an empty space where a life used to be. This wasn't nature breaking into civilization, it was civilization breeding something that shouldn't exist. She died steps from her front door, in a hallway, in a city. Not the kind of place you'd expect to face something savage. But sometimes it's not the setting that's wild, it's what you put in chains. She spent most of her life in chains, beaten, prodded, taught to dance for applause. Her name was Tyke, a 21-year-old African elephant, born in the wild, raised in captivity. For years she performed in the circus. Clumsy tricks, bright lights, crowds that clapped when she balanced on stools. Nobody asked what it cost her, or how many times she was hit to make her obey. But on August 20th, 1994, Tyke said enough is enough. It happened in Honolulu, Hawaii, inside the Blaisdell Arena. The show was just about to begin. Hundreds of families filled the seats. Kids with cotton candy, parents with cameras. And then, backstage, something snapped. Tyke charged her trainer, Alan Campbell, crushed him, stomped him until he stopped moving. Another circus worker tried to intervene. Tyke slammed into the wall and then she burst into the arena. Screams erupted, children ran, parents dropped their phones and grabbed whoever they could, because 9,000 pounds of rage had just entered the ring. She wasn't confused and she wasn't scared. She was angry and she wanted out. Tyke tore through the tent flaps, into the parking lot, and then into the streets of Honolulu. Panicked and determined, cars honking, people running, sirens blaring. Police arrived within minutes. But what do you do when you're facing an animal the size of a dump truck, with skin that can stop bullets and a mindset on escape? They opened fire, first handguns, then shotguns. Dozens of rounds. Tyke kept running, bloodied, limping, but unstoppable. She knocked over cars, trampled hedges. She made it nearly a mile before she collapsed in front of an office building. But she had been shot 87 times, and she still didn't die immediately. Witnesses said she swayed, tried to lift herself up, and then fell hard, dead. Alan Campbell was pronounced dead at the scene. The other trainer survived barely, but the city would never forget the chaos that unfolded in less than 30 minutes. Investigations revealed what animal rights activists had been saying for years. Tyke had a history of aggression. She had attacked handlers before. She was abused. She was triggered, and eventually she broke. Her story led to major changes in Hawaii. The state banned wild animals from being used in circuses. Other cities followed, but not everywhere. To this day, you can still find elephants in small-time circuses across America, still swaying in chains, still pretending to smile. Tyke became a symbol, not just of rebellion, but of the cost of control. You can train an elephant, you can chain it. You can even make it dance. But if it remembers the pain, one day it will dance on your bones. Tyke was tired of performing, and when she broke, she reminded everyone what elephants are really capable of. But the next story wasn't a tragedy born from captivity. This was a dare that ended exactly how you'd expect. There are some things you just don't do. You don't play chicken with a train. You don't poke a sleeping bear. And you don't swim in gator-infested waters at night, especially when the signs tell you not to. But Tommy Woodward didn't believe in signs or warnings or fear. It was just before midnight on July 3rd, 2015, a humid summer night in southeast Texas. Tommy was out with his friends at Burkhart's Marina, a quiet backwater place near the Louisiana border. Beer in hand, music playing, in the dark, still water of the Adams Bayou glowing under flickering light. There was a sign posted right there on the dock. No swimming, alligators sighted. A big one too, estimated at 11 feet. Locals had seen it cruising in the area just days earlier. People talked and word got around. But Tommy, he laughed. Witnesses say he looked at the sign, smirked, and then stripped off his shirt and shoes, and right before he jumped in, he yelled, "The alligators." Seconds later, the water exploded. A tail, a flash of teeth. Tommy screamed once, loud enough for everyone on the dock to hear. Then he disappeared. There was no wrestling, no second chance, just a splash and silence. His friend tried to go in after him, but the gator was gone, so was Tommy. For hours, local search crews scoured the area. At dawn, they found his body, floating, half submerged in thick brown water, bite marks along his chest and shoulder. His left arm was gone. The coroner ruled it a death by drowning, but the bites were unmistakable. This was a predatory attack, not defensive. The gator wasn't startled, it was hunting. And Tommy walked right into its mouth. Texas game wardens tracked and killed the alligator within 48 hours. They opened it up, and inside they found what was left of Tommy. It made national headlines not just because of the tragedy, but because of the last sentence, that infamous quote before he jumped. The alligators. Some people mocked him online and said he got what he asked for. Others defended him, calling it a drunken mistake. A young man trying to impress. But the truth is harsher than all of that. It wasn't about pride or courage or even stupidity. It was about one simple truth. When you mock nature, sometimes nature bites back. But the next victim didn't mock nature, she respected it. She followed the rules and it still wasn't enough. She was looking for peace, not trouble, not danger. Just fresh air, a bike trail, and the quiet hum of Montana's wilderness. Leah David Loken, a 65-year-old nurse from California, had joined her sister and a friend for a multi-day bike trip through the wild trails of western Montana. They were staying in Ovando, a remote town with a population barely scratching 100. Beautiful, isolated, simple. Leah slept in a tent just outside a post office in the town's designated camping area. They'd stopped for the night, unzipped their sleeping bags, and listened to the wind, the distant sound of rustling branches. They didn't know that something was watching. Around 3 a.m., a grizzly bear wandered into the campsite. Big, silent, predatory. It approached Leah's tent, nudged it, sniffed, and then wandered off. She woke up and she felt it. She knew. She and the others yelled, made noise, and scared it away, but only for a moment. Leah began moving food out of the tent, trying to calm herself. Maybe it was gone for good, she said. But that bear wasn't done. At 4:15 a.m., it came back, and this time it was hungry. The bear ripped open the side of her tent, dragged her out by the head. Her screams cut through the silence. Her sister and friend rushed out, yelling, banging pots, but the bear didn't care. It mauled her right there in the grass, crushed her rib cage, tore her torso apart, then vanished into the darkness. By the time that help arrived, Leah was gone. Her body lay broken, just feet from where she had been sleeping. Her blood soaked into the earth. And the bear, it wasn't finished. Over the next 48 hours, local authorities set traps, flew helicopters, scoured trails. They knew this was a rogue grizzly, not a frightened one, a predator, a stalker. And eventually they found it. DNA tests confirmed it was the same bear. Inside its stomach, human remains. They shot it dead. The town of Ovando mourned. Tourists left. Locals reinforced every trash bin, every food locker, every trail sign. But the truth settled in like the cold morning fog. If a bear wants you, a zipper isn't going to stop it. Leah wasn't careless. She followed the rules. She stored her food. She made noise. She did everything right. But sometimes right isn't enough. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated predatory attack. A reminder that deep in the wilderness, when the trees are still and when the air is quiet, something might be watching. And if it decides to come back, you won't hear it until it's already on top of you. But sometimes being careful just delays the inevitable. Because once, more than 100 years ago, a predator came from the sea. And it didn't just take one victim, it took 5. Before Jaws, before marine biologists had sonar or shark tags, before the idea of a shark attack had entered the public mind, there was 1916, and there was blood. It was a brutally hot summer. Polio outbreaks ravished East Coast cities, so families escaped to the beaches of New Jersey. The cool Atlantic breeze, the freedom of open water. It was supposed to be a refuge, but something else had come to shore that summer, something with teeth. A 25-year-old man named Charles Van Zandt went out for a swim before dinner. People heard screaming, but they thought he was joking, until he was dragged from the surf, bleeding out. His leg was shredded, and he died on the hotel lobby floor, surrounded by beachgoers in dinner jackets. 5 days later, another man, Charles Bruder, was swimming near Spring Lake, about 45 miles north. He never made it back. Witnesses saw a red pool forming around him. A lifeguard rowed out and pulled him from the water. His legs were gone below the knees, and he bled to death in the sand. Panic began to spread, but the media, they played it down. Scientists speculated and said that it was probably a sea turtle. Sharks don't attack humans, they said. And then it got worse. July 12th, Matawan Creek, a narrow inland waterway miles from the ocean. People felt safe here. Local kids mostly jumped into the creek to cool off. Among them, 11-year-old Lester Stilwell. He was swimming when suddenly he vanished beneath the water. At first, they thought it was a seizure. Then the water turned red. People on the banks saw something long, gray, and slicing through the current. A shark in the creek. A local man, Stanley Fisher, dove in to recover Lester's body. Instead, the shark came for him too. It tore open his thigh, but Fisher made it to the shore. He died hours later in a hospital in agony. 20 minutes later, just a mile upstream, the shark struck again. Another boy, Joseph Dunn, age 14, was bitten while climbing out of the water. He survived, but barely. 5 attacks in 12 days, 4 dead, all on the Jersey Shore. Suddenly, the media couldn't ignore it. The public demanded answers. Boats patrolled beaches. Fishermen hunted sharks with rifles and dynamite. Parents pulled their kids from the water, and hotels emptied. A few days later, a man caught a 7.5-foot great white off the coast. Inside its stomach were human remains. Whether it was the shark will never be proven, but some experts say it may have been a bull shark, known to swim in fresh water. Others believe it was multiple sharks, driven inland by warm waters and scarce prey. But the damage was already done. Before 1916, most Americans believed sharks were harmless to humans. After 1916, the belief was dead in the water. The Jersey Shore had changed forever. The ocean was no longer just waves and sunshine. It was a hunting ground, and people were no longer at the top of the food chain. Even now, more than a century later, when you step into that water, you still think about it. Because something might be watching. And if it's hungry, you won't know until it's already too late. You've heard the stories, the screams, the silence that followed. It doesn't care about your plans, your vacation, your family, or your life. It doesn't hate you, and it doesn't hunt you out of spite. It's just doing what it's always done. And if you step into the path at the wrong time, that's it. You see, the wild doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need a reason, and it doesn't forgive. So the next time you hear a twig snap behind you, the next time the water seems too still, or your instincts start to whisper, listen, pay attention. Because if something is watching you, by the time you realize it, it's already too late. This has been the worst animal attacks in US history. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing.